Hundreds of Russian logistics targets have been tracked and struck by Ukrainian UAVs in recent months, and that shows the battlefield in Ukraine is entering a more dangerous phase. Drones are no longer only hunting tanks near the front line. An ammunition truck, a motorcycle hidden under trees, a shelter behind the trenches, a small supply depot, or even a transport ship sitting inside a port can become a target once it is spotted from above. For Russia, this is not just about losing a few more vehicles. This is pressure aimed directly at the system that keeps the battlefield alive. Ammunition may arrive late. Fuel may be stopped on the road. Assault groups may lose their staging points before they can move forward. A convoy hit on the road does not only burn where it stands, but it can also slow the entire attack rhythm ahead. What makes Ukraine's UAV campaign so important is its continuity. From transport routes behind the front line to camouflaged troop positions, to the small mobile vehicles Russia uses to move soldiers toward the battlefield, every movement can become a coordinate. So is Ukraine destroying separate targets one by one, or is it attacking the entire system that keeps the Russian army fighting? And if logistics are no longer safe, how long can Moscow keep pressure on the front line? Let's find out with military force. Ukraine is now pushing its UAV campaign beyond the most visible part of the battlefield, and that shift places Russian logistics under direct pressure. The targets are no longer limited to tanks, trenches, or assault groups near Ukrainian defensive lines. They now include cargo routes, military trucks, supply depots, fuel points, repair areas, and transport networks that keep Russian units moving. This matters because every army depends on a steady flow behind the front before it can create pressure at the front. For Russia, logistics is the system that turns orders into action. Artillery needs shells before it can fire. Armored vehicles need fuel before they can move. Infantry units need food, water, batteries, spare parts, and medical support before they can hold a position or prepare another push. If one truck is destroyed, the loss may look small on camera, but the effect can spread. A delayed fuel delivery can stop vehicles from rotating. Missing ammunition can reduce fire support. Damaged repair equipment can leave broken systems stuck instead of returning to service. This is why Ukraine's focus on supply targets is more than a collection of drone strikes. It is an attempt to slow the Russian war machine at the point where it depends on movement, timing, and routine. Russian forces can still attack, but each supply trip now carries a higher cost. The roads behind the front line have become part of the fight because UAVs have changed the meaning of distance. In an older battlefield, a transport route behind the fighting area could be treated as a safer space. In Ukraine, that space is shrinking. A vehicle does not need to cross a trench line to be exposed. It only needs to move through a watched road, stop in a known area, or follow a pattern that can be studied from above. That creates a new kind of pressure on Russian commanders. They must think not only about where supplies are needed, but also how those supplies can move without being seen. A convoy may be forced to travel at different times, use longer routes, reduce its size, or hide more often. Each answer creates a new problem. Longer routes take more fuel and time. Smaller shipments reduce losses in one strike but make delivery slower. More hiding places demand more planning and discipline. Ukraine does not need every strike to destroy a major target for this pressure to matter. The larger goal is to make Russian logistics less predictable, less efficient, and more expensive. When transport becomes risky, the front line feels the result later. Guns fire less often, assault groups wait longer, and commanders lose the steady rhythm needed to keep an offensive moving. The reported strike on a Russian cargo ship at port shows that Ukraine is not treating maritime logistics as a safe rear system anymore. A vessel sitting at a pier may look far from the trenches, but its military value can be high if it carries ammunition, equipment, fuel, or other supplies for Russian forces in southern Ukraine. It is a floating storage point, a delivery platform, and a link between sea transport and ground operations. When Ukraine sends UAVs towards such a vessel, the message is clear. The war is reaching the places where Russia tries to prepare the next stage of combat before trucks and soldiers move forward. It also tells port crews, guards, and commanders that the harbor can become part of the battle space without warning. This kind of attack also changes how the battlefield is understood. The front is no longer only a line of villages, trenches, and artillery positions. It can reach into a port, onto a dock, and into the cargo flow that supports troops far away from the water. For Russia, a port is useful because it can handle heavier loads than narrow roads and connect occupied coastal areas with wider supply networks. For Ukraine, striking such a point creates uncertainty inside a system that depends on timing. If a cargo ship is delayed, damaged, or forced to unload under tighter security, the effect can move through warehouses, transport yards, and staging areas long before supplies reach the front. A delayed shipment does not need to stop an entire offensive to matter, because even small delays can reduce the rhythm of resupply. The port then becomes more than a transport facility. It becomes a pressure point inside the wider military economy of occupation. That matters most in the south, where coastal routes help link rear supply areas with forces trying to hold long and exposed lines. The timing of a night attack adds another layer of danger. Darkness can make detection harder for defenders, but it also demands careful planning from the attacking side. A UAV approaching a port must deal with water, lights, radar coverage, possible air defense positions, and the need to identify one vessel among many objects. That makes the strike more than a simple launch. It suggests route selection, target recognition, and patience. The drone must arrive from a direction that gives it the best chance to avoid interception before impact. It may fly low, use the shape of the coastline, or approach when defenders are less alert. This is why the route can be as important as the warhead, because the drone must survive long enough to reach the target. The value is not only in the explosion, but in proving that the port can be reached. Once that point is proven, every later movement inside the harbor becomes more sensitive and slower. The wider effect may be felt after the attack. If Russian commanders believe port logistics are vulnerable, they must spend more resources protecting ships, warehouses, loading areas, and nearby roads. Air defense systems may need to be moved or spread thinner. Cargo schedules may become less predictable. Ammunition and fuel may wait longer before being unloaded or transferred. Repair work, crew behavior, and port discipline can also become harder to manage under threat. The burden then shifts to other transport methods, which can create more pressure on roads, depots, and convoys behind the front. In that sense, one strike at a port can disturb more than one ship. It can force Russia to rethink how supplies move before the next assault begins. This is where the next layer of the story begins, because once sea routes feel less secure, the pressure returns to the ground routes that Russia must still use every day. Those ground routes may look ordinary, but under constant UAV observation, they can become the next weak link in Russia's supply chain. Russia's growing use of motorcycles, ATVs, quad bikes, and other light vehicles shows how much the battlefield has changed. These machines are not symbols of strength. They are a practical answer to a deadly problem. Large armored columns are easier to detect, easier to track, and slower to move through mined roads, artillery zones, and drone-watched approaches. By sending smaller vehicles forward, Russian units are trying to move faster, spread out more widely, and reduce the chance that one strike can destroy an entire formation. This shift also shows the pressure Russia faces when heavier armor becomes too costly to use in every assault. A motorcycle can carry 1 or 2 soldiers across open ground at high speed. An ATV can move supplies, ammunition, or wounded troops through rough paths that a truck may not safely enter. A light vehicle can rush through a tree line, reach a ruined building, or deliver men near a trench before Ukrainian fire becomes organized. On paper, this method gives Russian commanders more flexibility. It allows them to probe weak points, send small groups through gaps, and keep attacks moving when tanks and armored personnel carriers are too exposed. But speed does not remove the danger when the sky is being watched. From the ground, a fast motorcycle may look difficult to stop. From above, it becomes a moving mark with very little protection. A reconnaissance UAV can notice the direction of travel, the dust behind the wheels, the heat signature of an engine, or the place where the vehicle pauses under trees. Even camouflage is not always enough because repeated movement can reveal a pattern. Once that pattern is seen, the advantage of speed begins to weaken. The vehicle may still be fast, but it is now moving inside a field of observation. This is where small Russian vehicles become highly vulnerable. A tank or armored vehicle may survive fragments, small explosives, or a near miss. A motorcycle cannot. An ATV has almost no armor. A quad bike offers speed, but not real protection against FPV drones or bombs dropped from above. If a drone hits the engine, the driver, the fuel area, or the soldiers riding behind, the vehicle can be stopped immediately. The men who survive the first impact may be. The battlefield examples are clear. Motorcycles hidden in bushes have been found. ATVs carrying soldiers have been struck. Vehicles prepared for another push have been destroyed before they could leave their positions. These scenes matter because they show that Russian adaptation is real, but Ukrainian counter-adaptation is fast. Moscow is trying to solve the problem of armored losses by using cheaper and quicker platforms, while Ukraine is using UAVs to make even those platforms risky. The result is a harsh tactical trade. Russia gains movement but loses protection. It gains dispersion but creates more small targets across the terrain. This does not mean motorcycles and ATVs are useless. They can still help Russian troops move supplies, rotate small groups, and cross dangerous spaces when timing and weather are favorable. But they no longer offer the surprise that commanders may want. Each route must be chosen carefully. Each stop can be dangerous. Each hidden vehicle can still be found if a UAV has time to search. To strike these targets consistently, Ukraine needs more than one drone in the air. The next part of the battle is the network behind the strike, where reconnaissance UAVs and attack drones work together again. Ukraine's drone campaign becomes more dangerous when reconnaissance UAVs and attack drones operate as one connected system. The first aircraft does not always strike. Its job is to search, watch, confirm, and turn a quiet place into a target. It scans roads, tree lines, shelters, dugouts, supply points, and camouflaged vehicles before Russian troops understand that their position has been exposed. This is the real value of aerial observation. It gives Ukraine time to decide which target matters, which route is active, and which movement should be hit first. A watched road is no longer just a road. It becomes a map of habits, pauses, and mistakes. Reconnaissance. UAVs are effective because they notice details that soldiers on the ground may miss. Smoke rising from a forest can reveal a camp. Fresh tracks on a dirt road can suggest recent movement. A vehicle hidden under branches can still leave a shape, a shadow, or a heat mark. A soldier crawling through bushes may seem invisible at ground level, but from above he becomes a moving point. These signs may look small, yet they can begin the entire strike process. In modern drone warfare, a small mistake can become a location, and that location can become the start of an attack. Once the target is found, the attack role moves to FPV drones, bomber drones, or other strike units. Each type has a different purpose. An FPV drone can chase a moving vehicle, enter a shelter opening, or hit a weak point at close range. A bomber drone can drop explosives into a trench, a dugout, or a supply position from above. The key is coordination. Reconnaissance gives the eye, while the strike drone delivers the blow. Without the first layer, the attack drone may waste time searching. Without the second layer, the watch target may simply move away and return later. This is why the connection between observation and attack matters more than the drone itself. The example of smoke from a campfire shows how thin the line can be between concealment and exposure. A fire may be lit for warmth, cooking, or rest, but the smoke can mark the area from above. Once a UAV sees it, the location can be watched long enough to confirm whether it is a temporary stop or a real position. If soldiers, supplies, or vehicles appear nearby, the site can be passed to a strike team. A routine action then becomes the first step in a planned attack. This kill chain is not only about machines, it also depends on human skill, timing, and patience. A pilot may receive only rough coordinates, then still need to search under trees, between bushes, or around damaged buildings. The target may move, hide, or blend into the terrain. The pilot must choose the angle, control the approach, and decide when to strike. If the drone attacks too early, the target may survive. If it waits too long, the opportunity may disappear. Even a missed strike can still create pressure because it tells Russian troops that their route or shelter has been mapped. When this system works, Ukraine can move beyond isolated strikes and begin pressing the wider support structure that keeps Russian units fighting. That prepares the battlefield for later strikes on heavier support targets next. Ukraine's UAV campaign becomes more damaging when it moves beyond visible vehicles and begins striking the support system behind Russian assaults. A Russian attack does not start only when infantry leaves a trench or crosses open ground. It starts earlier, when artillery is positioned, engineering vehicles prepare routes, shelters hold troops, and small depots store ammunition, fuel, batteries, tools, and spare parts. These targets may look less dramatic than a burning tank, but they are often what make the attack possible. If Ukraine can find and hit them before the assault begins, Russian units may reach the line with weaker fire support, fewer supplies, and less room to recover from mistakes. Self-propelled artillery is one of the most valuable targets in this layer. It gives Russian infantry the covering fire needed to move through exposed terrain and pressure Ukrainian defenders. If a gun is damaged, destroyed, or forced to move farther back, the assault loses part of its shield. The infantry may still advance, but it faces more risk during the most dangerous minutes of movement. Engineering vehicles create a similar effect in a different way. They clear paths, handle obstacles, prepare crossings, and help units move through damaged ground or mine-covered approaches. When this equipment is hit, a planned route can remain blocked, a column can be delayed, and soldiers may be pushed toward worse ground where Ukrainian fire is easier to direct. That delay can matter because a late assault often meets a defender who is already prepared and waiting. Shelters, dugouts, supply points, and troop gathering areas form the quieter side of the same system. They allow soldiers to rest, hide, collect ammunition, receive orders, and wait for the next movement. They also give commanders a place to group men and equipment before an attack. But once a UAV identifies one of these places, protection can turn into danger. A shelter can be watched. A dugout can be hit from above. A supply point can burn before its material is distributed. A troop gathering area can be struck before the men reach the battlefield. The assault then begins with fewer people, less equipment, and lower confidence. This is the logic of systematic attrition. Ukraine does not always need one large strike to stop a Russian push. It can damage the smaller parts that keep the push alive. One strike on artillery weakens cover. One hit on engineering equipment slows movement. One attack on a staging area reduces strength before contact. Over time, these losses can break the rhythm of Russian operations because every assault depends on preparation, not only courage at the line. The effect is also psychological. Russian troops may begin to distrust shelters, avoid gathering in numbers, and move before they are fully ready. Commanders must disperse forces more widely, which reduces the power of the assault. As these support positions come under pressure, the burden returns to the transport network that must replace what was lost and keep the front supplied daily. Russian logistics convoys are now under pressure across the front because they must move through roads watched by Ukrainian UAVs. These convoys are not combat units in the usual sense, but they decide whether combat units can keep fighting. A truck carrying ammunition can decide how long artillery keeps firing. A fuel vehicle can decide whether armored vehicles move or stay still. A supply truck can bring food, batteries, spare parts, and medicine to soldiers. When these vehicles are detected in motion, the effect may be felt later at the firing line. The problem for Russia is that convoy movement depends on routine. Drivers need familiar roads, predictable stops, and known transfer points to keep supplies moving. UAV surveillance attacks that routine. If a route is used too often, it can be studied. If trucks stop in the same area, that place can become dangerous. If vehicles gather before moving, the convoy may be seen before it reaches the sector it is meant to support. Russian commanders then face choices that carry costs. Keeping the same route may invite another strike. Moving to a longer road burns more fuel, takes more time, and reduces the number of trips possible in a day. Splitting convoys into smaller groups may limit losses from one attack, but it also makes coordination harder. More vehicles need separate escorts, more drivers must follow stricter timing, and delivery becomes slower. In a war shaped by daily pressure, delay can be almost as damaging as destruction. This pressure is not limited to one battlefield pocket. From the northern sectors near Kharkiv to the southern areas near Kherson, UAVs are being used to watch infantry, vehicles, supply points, shelters, depots, and military positions. The scale matters because it shows a pattern, not a single dramatic episode. A 1,000-kilometer front cannot be controlled by one strike, but it can be shaped by repeated observation and constant danger. That is why convoy attacks carry strategic weight. They connect a small event on a road to the larger question of movement control. Each burned truck, delayed shipment, or abandoned route forces Russia to spend manpower just to keep the same pressure. Over time, the battlefield becomes harder to feed, harder to rotate, and harder to prepare. This leads to the larger conclusion, because UAV warfare is no longer just supporting combat. It is beginning to control how modern armies move. UAV warfare is no longer a side feature of the war in Ukraine. It has become one of the systems that decides how armies move, supply, hide, and attack. For Ukraine, drones are not only tools for striking targets. They are also instruments of pressure, forcing Russian units to rethink every road, shelter, convoy, and staging point. The deeper effect is not measured only by burned vehicles. It is measured by slower movement, longer routes, smaller groups, tighter camouflage, and more resources spent on protection instead of offensive action. For Russia, the next challenge is clear. Speed, dispersion, night movement, electronic warfare, and short-range air defense may reduce some losses, but none of them removes the danger from above. The question now is whether Russian adaptation can break this pressure, or whether control of the low sky will decide the next phase of the battlefield on the ground soon. War is not only about weapons and explosions, but also about the human cost when peace fails. The more clearly people understand modern warfare, the more seriously they can think about security, diplomacy, and the price of every conflict. If this analysis was useful, please like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear updates on the battles, weapons, and geopolitical changes shaping our world.